My name is Bobby. Horror has arisen on the great estate of Collinwood, with the arrival of two men, one living, one dead, and things have not only gotten scary, but also hairy.
Look at this telephone! It's so strange looking. It must be very old. Let's pretend that we can talk to someone from the past. Hello, my name's Amy Jennings. What's yours? I hear breathing. David, the West Wing is haunted, and I think the man I'm talking to is a ghost. Hi, I'm Bobby. Welcome to Dusty Old Movies. To kick off the summer, I actually went to a haunted cemetery this week. It was fun and kind of creepy. Sadly, none of the ghosts had a theme song. But it did get me in the mood to review the storyline on Dark Shadows, where Quentin's Ghost haunts Collinwood, which are episodes 638 to 700, and for the DVDs are volume 11 through volume 13. On Dark Shadows, Quentin's Ghost went coast to coast. But will this coast to coast ghost be the ghost with the most?
By the end of groovy 1968, the Adam and Eve story was winding down, and creator-producer Dan Curtis and the writers were trying to think of what to do next. Jonathan Frid, who played Barnabas the Vampire, complained that he was working too hard, what with starring in so many episodes and having difficulty memorizing his lines. So he told the producers that they needed to find a second male lead to help carry the show.
I don't know if Dan really cared what Jonathan thought, but he wanted the same thing, because with Barnabas as the lead, it always had to be a vampire story. But if you had another male lead who was just as popular, you could do new things. And he finally found his answer in one of his favorite ghost stories, Henry James's Turn of the Screw.
The story focuses on a governess working in a mansion where two kids become possessed by the ghosts of Peter Quint and Miss Jessel. Dan first saw the story as the terrifying play The Innocents. Then he read the book, and finally saw the movie, and became more fascinated every step of the way.
Since Dark Shadows had already done their own version of other Gothic classics like Jane Eyre, Dracula, and Frankenstein, Turn of the Screw seemed like the perfect choice for what to do next. And in homage to the original story, Dan named the Dark Shadows ghost after Turn of the Screw's Peter Quint, and so he created Quentin Collins. And they cast the incredibly handsome West Virginian actor David Selby in the role, and a new Dark Shadows icon was born.
Chris Jennings has recently returned to Collinsport, but when the moon is full, he becomes a werewolf. His sister Amy moves into Collinwood, and her and David sneak off into the closed-off West Wing, where they find an old disconnected telephone. While playing with it, they start talking to the ghost of Quentin Collins. Quentin possesses the children and makes them do his bidding. Peter Bradford momentarily returns to the present, and at her insistence, brings his wife Vicky back to 1795 with him. Barnabas sees a sign that Vicky is in danger, and goes back to 1795 to save her, and then returns. Chris Jennings moves into the cottage on the estate, and Barnabas discovers that Chris is a werewolf. Because of his vampire past, he feels sympathy and offers to help. Barnabas and Julia discover that the children are possessed, and with the help of Professor Stokes, they try to fight Quentin Collins, but his powers may be too great.
This storyline is a genuinely spooky ghost story, partially due to its source material, and due to the sense of isolation. I can relate. Turn of the Screw is a terrifying, slow-burn ghost story, and they keep the basic idea of two kids becoming possessed by ghosts. But in the book, it's from the governess's perspective, and you never really know if there are really ghosts or if it's in the governess's mind. Now that would have been hard to do for 62 episodes, especially since the governess character, Victoria Winters, was being phased out. So they switch it to being from the children's perspective. You lose the mystery, but you get to see how the kids get involved with the ghosts. It starts off as just a game, but then they get deeper and deeper into it to where they can't escape. And very often, one will be in their right frame of mind and trying to find a way out, but the other will be in full possession mode and won't let that happen.
I'm gonna tell Mrs. Stoddard!
No, Amy! You're gonna play the game, just like Quentin wants us to. Mr. Juggins met Miss Evans on a darkened night. The poor girl fainted dead away, he gave her such a fright. Mr. Juggins, keep it up. Mr. Juggins, keep it up. Mr. Juggins, keep it up until Aunt Liz believes me.
It's extremely creepy to watch these kids struggle and go in and out of possession. And it's a great change to make it different and stand apart from the book. Along with the source material, the sense of isolation also makes things spooky. The last story had so many characters and so many sets, but here they scale back and put the focus on Collinwood and the main group.
So not only do you become more intimately involved with your main characters, which always makes it scarier, but it also feels like there's no way to escape, because Quentin can be present on all of the grounds of Collinwood. And then, when they do try to bring a new character in to help, they either fail or are killed, like Madame Finley. Spirit, you must appear to me. I know you died in this room. Why do you want to keep me here? Da, 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 da. Why do you want that music to play? Da, da, no. 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 Because no one can help, the situation seems more hopeless and scarier. Also making things scary are the spooky characters.
By the light of the silvery moon, I want to spoon to my honey, I'll croon love.
There are a lot of great spooky characters in this story, but we'll start with the main newcomer, David Selby as Quentin Collins. Quentin Collins is a Collins family ancestor, who lived in the late 1800s and is now haunting Collinwood.
He wears a Victorian frock coat, has mutton chop sideburns, how attractive! And he has his very own theme song, Shadows of the Night, which is played on an old gramophone. Dark Shadows composer Bob Colbert retooled his music from Dan Curtis's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde to create this theme. It not only creates a spooky mood, but it also establishes Quentin's presence even when he's not visible.
As a ghost, Quentin doesn't talk. Beetlejuice didn't get the memo. So he expresses himself through facial expressions, mainly a scowl or a smirk. Thankfully, David is a very charismatic actor, so even though he's not doing much, you're still drawn to him. However, there are a few glimpses into Quentin's personality. You see his callousness and his temper, but you also see his sense of humor, like when he meets Ezra the craftsman and has to cover up the fact that he doesn't talk.
Oh, Ezra, why didn't you write down the page number? You knew you'd forget it. Oh, Mr. Collins. Oh, you're not Barnabas Collins. You must be his friend. I must tell you a little story. I made this pentagram myself. Oh, I know you. Yes. You're Quentin Collins, yes. But you're dead. You're dead.
Despite his sideburns, there's someone even hairier than David Selby. Chris Jennings, the werewolf, played by Don Briscoe in human form, and by Dark Shadows stuntman and coordinator Alex Stevens in the werewolf form. Creator-producer Dan Curtis had been reluctant to use a werewolf because he thought they were hokey. But they were starting to run out of monsters, so he finally relented.
When seeing the werewolf makeup, I can see his point. The werewolf scenes do come across as more campy than scary. But during the human scenes, Don Briscoe gives an excellent, likable, and vulnerable performance as Chris Jennings.
It was just a few days past my 21st birthday. I had just graduated college, and I thought nothing could stand in my way. Then something did. I began to feel this great pain all over my body. It was terrifying. And then I looked down. My hands had begun to grow hair. Then I looked in the mirror, and there was hair growing all over my face. The next morning I woke up. I thought it was a nightmare. Until I saw the evidence. Evidence I've seen 100 times. Muddy tracks on the floor, furniture around the room, and always the news that someone had been attacked and often killed by a large animal. And I knew the animal was me. Because of his werewolf past, Chris has been on the run for years, but after the death of his parents and his twin brother, he goes back to Collinsport to be near his little sister. He tries to be a good person, but when things get hairy, he becomes a murderer to his victims and emotionally unavailable to his friends and to his sister, which makes her feel blue.
The story depends on the acting of David Hennessy as David Collins and of Denise Nickerson as Amy Jennings, and both of them are frightfully fabulous. Both seamlessly go from being normal kids to being evil and possessed children, to being terrified and fighting for their lives. Making Amy even more interesting is her protectiveness over Chris and her strange psychic connection to him. She doesn't know he's a werewolf, but she is always concerned when the moon is full, and she sees the sign of the pentagram in Chris's upcoming victims.
While this story brings us some new great characters, we also lose two familiar dark shadowy faces, Victoria Winters and Joe Haskell.
For Vicky's departure, Barnabas goes back in time to 1795 to save Vicky from being hung as a witch. After a few complications, it works. Peter Bradford and Vicky plan to go west, and Vicky says goodbye to Barnabas.
You shouldn't linger. The sooner you're gone, the safer you'll be. I just wanted to say goodbye. No matter what happens, no matter where I go, I'll always feel close to you, and I'll always feel that you're somewhere nearby. Goodbye, Vicky. The regular actress Alexandra Mulkey was no longer playing the character, so it was time for Victoria Winters to hit the road. And I love that they go back to 1795 to do it, because it's great to see Angelique and the other characters again. As for the scene itself, yes, it would have had a bigger impact if it was Alexandra, but the replacement does a good job, and Jonathan Freud still brings the emotion to it. And him saying goodbye to the woman he loves is indeed a heartfelt send-off to Victoria Winters.
The other character is good old Joel Haskell, played by Joel Crothers, who wanted to leave Dark Shadows for other acting opportunities. In this story, Joel Haskell sees Chris turn into the werewolf, and Joe goes completely batty, no offense, and is sent off to Wincliffe Sanitarium.
She's not the only one in danger. Everyone is. No one must see. No one must know. Where's Chris? It gives Joel Crothers some real acting to do, and even though it's not as heartfelt as Vicky's departure, it is fun. And although I like Joe Haskell, as I said before, this story thrives on the sense of isolation, so his departure happens at the perfect time. Because when Vicky leaves the show, Maggie Evans, who's also been around since the beginning, becomes the new governess. Now in the last storyline, her father died. And here, Joe Haskell, her ex, leaves the show. So she loses all connections with anyone outside of Collinwood. So Collinwood becomes her entire world and ours.
As hoped, Quentin Collins became a sensation. David Selby received tons of fan mail, was featured in teen magazines, and even had some fans camping out in the lobby of his apartment building. His theme song, Shadows of the Night, became a top 10 single and was even nominated for a Grammy. Dan Curtis would go back to Turn of the Screw 2 more times, once more on Dark Shadows with the ghost of Gerard Stiles, and then in his own TV movie version of the story, featuring Maggie Evans herself, Catherine Lee Scott, as the ghost of Miss Jessel. When Maggie replaces Vicky as governess, the two characters essentially merge together, and this would later be referenced in the 2012 Dark Shadows movie, where a character named Maggie Evans changes her name to Victoria Winters before becoming the governess of Collinwood.
In many ways, this story seems like a throwback to the earlier episodes of Dark Shadows, with more of a focus on atmosphere and the characters, but with a couple of crazy elements thrown in, like a werewolf. It's a shorter storyline, but I really enjoyed it, and I give it 4 hairballs out of 4. Thank you for watching Dusty Old Movies, and have a fuzzy day!